It's one thing to read about the past, it's another to see it up close and to think about how people got their information back then. During World War II, what people believed often depended on the headlines they saw, the voices they heard, and the messages they trusted. Meet these students who just returned from Europe studying World War II and the journalists who covered it on this edition of In the Studio. History feels different when you're standing where it happened, and so does thinking about how people made sense of war through newspapers, radio, and propaganda. Welcome to In the Studio, where in each episode we learn more about activities, organizations, and individuals here at Hanover College. I'm Sydney Siegel. We are a group of Hanover students who have been following in the footsteps of reporters in the European theater during World War II, learning about these conflicts, examining media reports, and practicing some journalistic techniques ourselves. Joining me are sophomore communication major Doug Pagel, junior business major Adair Dooley, and junior psychology and business double major Veira Robbins. Thanks for joining me, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's get started. Was there a moment that helped you understand what it takes to make people care about events happening in another part of the world?
There was a moment when I was standing on the beaches of Normandy, specifically Utah and Omaha, where it just really hit me, just being able to see the cliffs that they climbed and seeing how close the turrets were to the beach and the fact that they had to wade through that water and it was cold, it was freezing. It was just very, I don't even know how to describe it being there. But what really, really got to me were the cemeteries that we went through. Seeing all of them just row after row and seeing the ages, it really made me realize how close they were to our age, just college student age. It was heartbreaking, but it was also breathtaking to just be there. And it made me realize that we can't just throw facts at people to make them understand what happened. They really need the names, they need the faces, and we just need to humanize it to make them understand.
Yeah, I feel like Margaret Brookwright's photos of Buchenwald was that moment for me. In one image, she captures rows of prisoners staring directly into the camera. She didn't have to say anything. She let the pictures speak for themselves. I feel like no captions could explain their suffering. But I feel like it was her decision to include the photos of the Germans being forced to see the camp. I feel like that's what made the impact last. And I feel like to make people care, you have to show them what they don't want to see.
What really connected it all for me was when we went to places like Berlin and Nuremberg, and you could just see the difference in the infrastructure due to the bombings that happened. You could see what happened under the GDR and how they viewed things and where the Berlin Wall was. I didn't know it was like that. I didn't know that there was two. Just to be there to see the impact that it had on society and how much history was destroyed and how much is in rubble and how many fake pieces were put up just so we could remember it, or how many plaques were around every single corner. Like, to be there to see it all makes me want to know more and care more. And I feel like if you were there, then you have that experience.
Yeah, so that moment happened for me during our visit to the Buchenwald concentration camp. I remember I was at the museum there and I picked up an audio recording about this man who was a prisoner there, and he was talking about how he and the rest of the prisoners of Buchenwald were all corralled into the theater, and one by one they were sent up to the stage where a doctor sat, and their cards would get sorted as they go. And he was so terrified of getting sent to Auschwitz that he lied about his health. He had tuberculosis, but he didn't tell them that. And then for days afterwards, he was so anxious about being caught in his lie, and I just felt that. And at the end of the recording, he was talking about how one day they were rounded up into the courtyard, and men were called forward and given food and told that they were going to hospitals, but he later found out that they were shipped off to Auschwitz. And that, I don't know what it was, but that story hit me in the gut, and I just felt so moved, and I felt his fear as my own. And it highlighted that human interest, importance in stories, especially when you're reporting on war and conflict. And there's so much, it's so easy to talk about the numbers and the scale, but I think it's harder to capture like those close-ups of human lives. And like you were saying, that's what really makes people care. I mean, I didn't know this individual that I heard about, but like I cared about what was happening to him, and it was just so, the feeling I was going through was just so profound.
Mm-hmm. So I have a question for you all. Was there a part of the trip that made you think we should still be paying attention to this today?
Yeah, Normandy stood out to me, just standing on the beach where thousands of Allied soldiers lost their lives. I couldn't help but to feel the weight of history standing on the beaches, and I feel like what hit me the hardest was to see how fragile peace really is. The rows of white crosses in the American cemetery, the German bunkers still buried in the sand, and the waves crashing against the shore that was what's filled with blood. It just kind of reminded me that the cost of freedom is steep and it must not be forgotten. But like you were saying earlier, I was also thinking, like, I'm 21, like these kids are around my age or younger than me. And, you know, it was freezing cold when we were there, and I couldn't imagine having to jump off the boats into the freezing cold water. They were wearing probably less than what we were wearing. And, you know, 9 out of 10 troops died getting off the boats. And I'm just really thankful that they made the sacrifice so that we don't have to.
Yeah. So again, Buchenwald, I'm going to keep referring to him. But it was that moment, I mean, just standing there, like you were saying, it felt so heavy. Like I was walking on haunted ground. It felt so disrespectful for me to be standing there. And it felt even more wrong to take pictures, like it would cheapen the immense suffering that happens there. And but what really struck me was what our guide was talking about when we started the tour, that far-right groups in Germany today are gaining traction, and they're trying to cut funding to places like Buchenwald. And like they're saying that upkeeping these places isn't important, and that makes me so angry and like so like that scares me, because memory is fleeting, and I feel like without these like physical landmarks to remind us, it's just going to get swept into the wind. And I honestly think that might be their end game, and we can't let that happen. I mean, the Holocaust memorials, they serve as tangible reminders of the atrocities that were committed in World War II, and they also provide essential like education to our generation and the people that come after us to combat like denial and distortion and misinformation, and it keeps us accountable and responsible for what the roles that our ancestors played in the war. And I just think if we stop visiting like places like that, like I said, it's just going to get lost to memory, and we just really can't let that happen, because then it happens again. Yeah.
I agree. So I was wondering, how has this experience shaped your understanding of what it takes to report on difficult or even dangerous issues?
So early on in our trip, our class held man on the street interviews, and I'm not a very outgoing person, so I personally was terrified. And it was in Stockton, London, and it's just full of art and culture, and there's just so many things to ask. And we had our amazing question about the relationship between the US and the UK. And I was terrified to ask that because I knew it was going to get political, and I didn't know how people were going to react. And luckily, my group, we had 2 very different polar opposite responses. But I feel like just to go out there and be like, oh, I'm terrified to talk to a random person on the street is nothing compared to what people had to do. They had to, Murrow watched the bombs go down in London, and you had the reports from Normandy, and you had one woman writing about her experience on a train, overhearing the violence a soldier would commit to her just because she was there reporting on it. So just to put that in my perspective, I had it so easy just to walk up to a stranger and be like, hi, I have a question.
Yeah, to that effect, to what you were saying, I hadn't fully grasped how dangerous war reporting is. We've been saying before, it's one thing to hear about it, it's another thing to experience it. And I hadn't really grasped what it takes to do it well. These reports that we were talking about, and reading about Edward R. Murrow sitting on the London rooftops, like you were talking about, Adair, during the Blitz. He was exposed to the German bombs. He was sitting on the roofs the same time that these soldiers were looking for these raiders. And he was doing this so he could report what was really happening. And it just gave me a whole new level of respect for the people that did it then and who do it now. Yeah, he wasn't hiding underground. He was up there in the action and in physical danger. And that was a choice he made every day. Ernie Pyle was the same. He landed on Omaha Beach with infantrymen, choosing to face the same dangers that they did just so he could tell their stories. And, you know, it wasn't, like we were saying earlier, it wasn't easy. There were German bunkers pounding the shoreline with those big guns, tearing through the Allied ranks. More people died than survived in those first few waves. And it just made me realize that reporting on conflicts in difficult or dangerous situations, it's not just about being brave. It's about having like a really strong sense of duty and commitment towards what you're doing. It takes emotional resilience and empathy and a willingness to put yourself in those situations and like see the larger picture beyond yourself. And that's the kind of journalism that I feel makes people care. So.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, I agree with everything that you just said. Pyle, Berkwhite, and Murrow did so much during their time. Pyle was unfortunately killed during one of his excursions in the Battle of Okinawa. Mm-hmm. And Berkwhite, she was threatened by the people on the train. Like, one of them literally said they wanted to kill her. And that's terrifying. Like, as a woman, I cannot imagine being there reporting and some man just being like, I'm going to kill you. That's so scary to think about. And she was so brave in what she did, especially when she went to Buchenwald and she took pictures of the people of Weimar walking through. And just, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, seeing those pictures really just made me realize, wow, this is insane. I can't imagine like being alive during that time and being there and acting like I didn't know anything was happening. And then Murrow, him standing on the rooftop when bombs are literally dropping all around him. Like, he could have been in the shelter, he could have left, but instead he was there broadcasting so the world knew what was happening to them. And honestly, I just applaud him and the others for all that they've done because they are very, very brave people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like those are all really good points. I feel like I always understood that their work was dangerous. Walking the same beaches in bomb cities gave me a deeper respect for what they endured to report the truth. They chose to document some of the darkest times in history. They gave a voice to the voiceless. But I feel like they also carried those voices home with them, often at a great emotional cost. On this trip, I learned that to report on war, it's not just to risk your life, it's to risk your sense of peace. And they didn't look away, and they didn't let the world look away either.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, no. And to follow that interesting conversation, what do you think mainstream media often leaves out when covering war and conflict?
I feel like mainstream media mainly focuses on statistics, strategy, and politics, but often leaves out the human cost of war. I feel like that was something Ernie Pyle did really well, showing the human side of it. But even with Murrow's haunting words or Berkwhite's images, I feel like it was the raw emotional truth that they showed. They weren't just numbers, they were people too. Today, in coverage of Gaza or Ukraine, you often see the same thing. You see headlines of troop movements or even ceasefire negotiations, but you rarely see the extended personal coverage of the trauma that the people are going through, and even children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think something that we often miss out on is the emotional depth, the stuff that makes you feel the human cost of war. And so much of what we see today comes fast and quick. We're very much like in a very fast-paced environment and society. And I feel like a lot of what we see is often surface level, even like especially on social media, where a lot of our generation gets its information, and even on TV sometimes I feel like and I know we do hear from people affected by war, but I feel like it doesn't land the same way that descriptive writing does. There's just something different about it, you know, and a well-crafted article lets you sit with someone's experience and it gives space for reflection. But when you transfer it, I think when you transfer it to like a TV or social media, because it's such a fast-paced culture, you can't sit with it because it's already gone. So our trip just made that really clear to me, and hearing firsthand stories and reading personal accounts, it made like their suffering feel real in a way that news, I feel like, really captures. I also realized how rarely context is given, especially in our news media today. I think without without that background, it makes it harder to understand, like, why did this happen? What's going on? What are the key pieces that happened before that makes this make sense? And I respect the people who do go that extra mile to give us that context today, because I do know that some reporters do that for us, which I very much respect it. And then lastly, I feel like not all wars and conflicts get the same coverage. I feel like the bigger the better, and especially in America, we almost feel like we sensationalize some things, and that's just not the point. And so, like, the things that matter often get overlooked in the process.
Mm-hmm. I think that mainstream media leaves out the humans, like you were saying. Like, it leaves out the teenager who was just thrown into war, the mother who's trying to protect her child during a bombing. Like, we can see some of that on social media, and even if we see it, we don't understand. Like, personally, none of us have went through that. And being able to walk through Europe and see all of that, though, like, kind of made me understand, but I will never truly understand unless it happens to me. Right now, with all the wars going on, we are lucky enough to have social media to see that. And there's a few people who post daily about, like, what's going on today in Gaza. But once they lose, like, their social media or even access to it, we won't know what's happening. And it's scary to think about that. And from their perspective, I'm sure they're terrified because they won't get their voice heard. No one will know what's happening to them.
And just like to go after like the humanizing and people our age, just with mainstream media and media that was produced later, like everything, including Hollywood, can be just so wrong. I mean, you went to the concentration camp and you were just sent with chills, and you had to think that such a large age group was in there. And I'm like, I remember watching The Boy in Striped Pajamas in like grade school and being like, oh, this is so accurate, this is amazing, like this is the best movie, but really going there and being like, oh, that is not accurate at all. There's no way they had free time, there's no way like somebody wouldn't know this had happened, there's no way anybody could sneak in or sneak out. And just to be like, the way that things can be over-romanticized or doctored in Hollywood, and you just take it and you're like, this is how it is. This is how the war is. Like, this is how heartbreaking it is. And granted, there are some truths behind it and things that are just like so heart-wrenching that you just can't capture in the media, or things that you shouldn't release just yet, like the photos that were shown to us that were released 15 years later after the camp got out. Because you want to show the death and the destruction, because you want to expose everything and not harm the human like value and how they see everything. It's just, I don't know, it's one thing that media needs to go against is like how many troops were lost, the ages. Like, personally, when I heard like people's names that we've lost, I just like, you connect more, you see more, and it makes you care more. Just to be like, oh yeah, there's this war going on in the world in a smaller country that's not our own, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't care. And just all the media, like especially seeing like American like politics in different countries, I found that odd, because it was like every third thing was about us, and I'm like, that's weird. Like, there's other things going on in the world. Like, I want to know what's happening here, but just media needs to cover the human aspect, and they need to cover the nitty-gritty details, make sure that people care and they stay informed. Thank you guys for the amazing answers. I hope this changes people's views on how we view media, especially on war.
Yeah, Thank you, guys. Now, before we conclude, I wanted to ask one final question. Is traveling to famous sites in Europe different than how you imagined they would be from seeing them in social media?
Yeah, kind of two things for me. Normandy, I always thought, why did so many troops die? And then when you're there, you realize how close the bunkers actually were to the beach. And there's no cover. The only cover they had was the obstacles that the Germans placed on the beach. And then I think y'all would probably agree with this, but Paris wasn't, I liked it, but it smelled a lot in some places, and I wasn't really expecting that.
I think something that we already covered earlier was that things are over-romanticized, and Paris, the city of love, definitely over-romanticized. It was amazing. Paris was a bucket list item for me for years, and honestly, it was kind of anticlimactic, to be for real. It was great to see all of those, the Louvre. I wanted to see the Louvre so badly because I'm very much an artistic person. And to see the Eiffel Tower, all these iconic, landmarks of Paris, but, everything else, I could have gone without.
Yeah. When we first walked up to the Eiffel Tower, I was thinking, oh, okay, this is it. But the closer that Professor Winters and I got, the more that I was like, okay, this is gorgeous. And she was describing to me the architecture, how well put together it was, because I did not want to go up there.
Oh no.
I'm so proud of you for going.
But I really enjoyed just walking up there, and Professor Winters definitely made it better walking up to it because she was able to describe all of that. But the closer that I got, I was on the phone with my grandparents, and I was like, this is beautiful, actually. I don't know why earlier I was like, because it was gorgeous, and I'm so glad that we got to see it.
Yeah.
I think it was my favorite part of Paris. The Louvre was,
The Louvre had its ups and downs. It was amazing to go see. I saw the Mona Lisa with mine own eyes, and that's a flex I will carry to my grave. But 3.5 hours of trying to figure out where I'm going was just not the moment for me.
and how to get out.
Yes, but we made it. We're here. I got to see some really cool art, and I actually loved the sculptures there. I didn't think I was a sculpture girl, but I think I was just looking at the wrong sculptures, to be honest, because the ones I was seeing there were just so beautiful and interesting. And I was thinking, something that I was thinking there is, I was telling another classmate of ours was, that's true artistry right there. It's you have to think about how many hours they spent carving every single detail into stone. And part of me misses the craft, that kind of craft. So yeah, Paris was amazing.
Personally, I have been wanting to go to Nuremberg, especially the Nuremberg Trial Museum, because I found out last semester that my great-grandfather was in Germany, in Nuremberg, during the trials.
What?
So I was like, yes, I get to be there, where he was, because he died when I was really young, so I wanted to know as much as I possibly could. So I found that so interesting. I was so excited for Germany. Love Germany, love the food, everything. I went to every place I was told to go, because there was this medieval type place that was amazing. So it was so much fun. Paris, it was okay. The Eiffel Tower, gorgeous. I didn't go to the Louvre, which I'm a little heartbroken over, but I did see a man on the street just wheeling around the Mona Lisa in a shopping cart. So I had that, not the real one, but I got to see modern art, and I went to a lot of free museums with our amazing professors, and I just had an amazing time. To go back to I went to London last summer, and just to go back and to see different things. And we had people on the trip who got to go see plays, or we went out and we got to see Phantom of the Opera, which was so much fun. But just to go there and just to experience everything was so amazing. Oh, and to be in France when the Pope was announced, and you just heard the church bells for an hour. It was wild.
Yeah, it was amazing. It's been such an adventure traveling with you guys. I, for one, had an amazing time. This course has helped us understand more about the world and made many of us want to travel more and see new places for ourselves. It has helped us learn more than just what we read or hear and understand real stories behind the news. Thanks for joining us in the studio.
This is Shoreditch, a bustling and bright area of London. This district is one of London's most vibrant neighborhoods. Tourists explore shops and eat street food, while locals follow their daily routines, surrounded by walls alive with graffiti that convey impactful messages and spark thoughtful conversation.
In a recent poll, 70% of Brits believe the special relationship between the UK and US no longer exists. To see what Londoners have to say about the results, I hit the streets in Shoreditch to ask for myself. Victoria from Brighton has this to say on the matter.
Opinions for this shift vary, ranging from foreign policy, international trade tensions, and the evolving role of America on the world stage. Some locals express concern over political instability, while others express concern about visiting the U.S.
Donald Trump's influence on the UK and US relationship.
Trump's not going to ruin, I mean, he probably did for a few years. By the end of the day, I think like both nations quite closer ties than they like to admit.
The last street
because,
interview.
like, that's where you saw, like, that's where all the movies come from and stuff like that. But then as I've gotten older and as I just like watch the news, I have completely gone over to the other side, and the interest has is not there.
I've considered it a place to go on holidays, but I wouldn't now.
An Anglo-British friend who's in California, and we thought of going to see them, but we've heard stories about people getting stopped.
With 1,356 days remaining in Trump's second term, we will see how opinions fluctuate. Reporting from London, I'm Veira Robbins.
Good idea.
The Shoreditch neighborhood is filled with creative works of graffiti that convey passionate messages. If these walls could talk, they would speak volumes about the shifting perspectives in Britain today.
Reporting from London, I'm Doug Pagel.